Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Hey, welcome to the Center for Latin American Studies. We have often, I was going to say every 2 weeks, but sometimes it's more often, the class speaker series when we invite visiting scholars, visiting professors to come and share with us our research. If you don't get our newsletter yet, please register on our website so you can get all the programming. Before I start, actually, on the topic of the Brazilian dictatorship that we are going to talk about today, next week on February 14, Valentine's Day, we're having an international conference on authoritarianism, memory, and human rights in Latin America, with guests from Brazil, from Argentina, from Chile, and his faculty too. So it will be a whole day, full-day conference, and I really, really hope that you are able to join us. So today, we want to welcome Alessandra Gasparotto, who is here from the Universidade Federal de Pelotas in Brazil. Alessandra is one of our Billy Lozano Fellows this year. The Billy Lozano Fellowship is a fellowship that we have recently created to honor Billy Lozano, who is a long-term friend of the library. And it has the specific goal to enhance our collection, our library collection, at the same time that will provide a visiting scholar the opportunity to work here and to share with us her research. So that's what's going to happen today. Alessandra is also a historian with her PhD from the Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul Federal University, and she specializes also in the teaching of history, which is a field that we share. Yeah. So today she developed research projects about the teaching of history and about the dictatorship. So thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Kayla. Thank you.
Looking forward to hearing.
All right. Thanks.
I think you need to be there, right?
Just to go through slides.
Yeah. Okay. No, just to be on Zoom.
No, it should
It
show
goes everywhere.
Yeah,
All right.
okay.
So feel free to.
All right.
within the first.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Alessandra, I'm Brazilian, and I'm a history professor in a university located in the south of southern Brazil. It's almost Uruguay. And I would like to start just thanking class for being here. It's been a wonderful opportunity. I'm really honored to be here and learn from you. And today my talk will be about corporate complicity and human rights violations in Brazil's dictatorship, insights from recent Amazon research. But I will start from the beginning. I don't know how much you know about the Brazilian dictatorship, but Brazil, as many other South American countries, had dictatorships, especially from the 60s and the 70s. These dictatorships were held in a context marked by the Cold War, the Cuban Revolution, and these coups and dictatorships that took place in South America. Here you can see the beginning, that all these countries have or dictatorships or coup d'estates or attempts of authoritarian regimes. And these revolutions usually were supported by the US government and were funding and had an articulation by the armed forces with the support and founding of local dominant groups. So in Brazil, the coup ousted the president João Goulart. He was a member of the Labour Party, and his government was trying to make a lot of reforms in Brazil, important reforms, like agrarian reform, tax reform, and a lot of sectors, especially social movements and left-wing parties, were supporting these reforms because it was important to change the country, to develop the country. And so not only in Brazil, but in most of the South American countries during the 60s and the 70s, there were a lot of social struggles and that were emerging. Is seeking to block these reforms, the dominant sectors organized a campaign to destabilize Goulart government, and that culminated in a coup in March 1974. And then we have a very long dictatorial regime in Brazil. It lasted about 21 years, and many of marks of this dictatorship are still present in the Brazilian society. So in recent years, a lot of studies are trying to highlight the class nature of these dictatorships, just seeking to show the place of the civil sectors financing and articulating the coups and sustaining the dictatorship's regimes. And in addition, various investigations have highlighted the responsibility or complicity of companies in human rights violations. This is a field of study that is very prominent in Argentina because investigations have led to lawsuits that have resulted in the trial or conviction of important companies like Ford, Fiat, and Mercedes-Benz. I don't know if you can read this picture, but the image shows a banner that says, in this Ford Motors parking lot, people are kidnapped and tortured during the Argentine dictatorship. And it's really interesting because in 2018, former Ford executives were convicted of kidnapping 24 workers in 1976. And it was a very big judgment in Argentina that had a lot of advertising and mobilized a lot the public opinion. And well, what this field of study revealed, how have the complex relations between companies, businessmen, business people, and the dictatorship being problematized, specifically in Brazil? So we have a lot of several points in these studies that we seek to elucidate, but the following stand out. To think about the support or articulation for the coup in 1964, the development of certain companies during the dictatorship, and the economic benefits arising from their support for dictatorial regimes, the repression of workers and the loss of labor rights during that period, support and financing of repressive actions coordinated by the state, and that is the thing I'm studying, the corporate responsibility or complicity for human rights violation. So it's really important to say that according to a study developed by Pereira, Payne, and Bermudez, they found that through commissions in 11 Latin American countries reported 232 cases of corporate complicity in human rights violations during their dictatorships or armed conflict. And more than half, 123, were reported by Brazilian two commissions. So in Brazil, we have, in the last few years, a lot of actions in court, especially those that were supported by unions and civil society actors who have gathered evidence to use the justice system. The most important case were against Volkswagen, the German car industry. And this investigation against Volkswagen resulted in assigning the company had to sign a conduct adjustment agreement for its responsibility in the violation of human rights during the dictatorship. So, for example, Volkswagen was held responsible, among other practices, for persecuting and monitoring its workers and practicing torture on the factory place. Yeah. Besides Volkswagen, we have also another lawsuit against Companhias Doca de Santos and also against Embraer, that is the Statoil airplane company in Brazil. And I don't know if you can see here, I took one picture of this is a BBC report, Volkswagen to compensate workers over Brazil torture. And here is a Brazilian newspaper that shows one of the workers from Volkswagen. So the Volkswagen paid for the workers or their families, and also for creating memory actions. And part of this research was also used to development of new research. So this new research is about, I'm going to talk now. With this money paid for Volkswagen, the Federal Public Ministry, I don't know if the translation is okay, Ministério Público Federal.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Federal Attorney's Office or Public Ministry.
Public Ministry, okay. So the Public Ministry gave this money to São Paulo Federal University to develop a big project that should investigate 13 companies, okay? All the name of the companies are here, but probably who is Brazilian, we will recognize easily, but who is not, it includes, for example, car industry like Fiat, Petrobras, that is the oil company, mining companies, for example, Belgo Mineira and Mannesmann, Embraer, that I told before. So,
newspaper.
So newspaper, Folha de São Paulo, yes, is a really one of the biggest, big newspapers in Brazil, is also under investigating. So this project, we had 13 teams of researchers that should make a research and give all the general aim of this investigation was to generate data for the Federal Public Prosecutor Office in actions to hold these companies accountable, to make, to discover if the companies are responsible or not for human rights violation. So I'm going to talk about one project that I coordinate with a group of people, and it's about one company. The name is Josapar. Josapar today, just one second. There is another thing interesting in this project, that the researchers should pay attention, for example, about issues about races, incorporate practices, and even the resistance strategies by the Black movement. Gender issues is really interesting because, for example, the research team found a lot of evidences that Petrobras, that is our big oil company in Brazil, had a lot of practices of persecuting, homosexuals. So this research gave us a lot of elements to understand more how these companies worked during that period. Also about indigenous people and questions relating to the participation of the labor court in violations. So the research I'm going to present is about Josapar. Josapar is a one of the largest agribusiness companies in Brazil. It's a company known for producing Tio João rice. It's a very popular rice in Brazil, or beans, biju. I don't know if you know these marks. And Josapar is a company from Pelotas, from the state I am from, but it was involved in human rights violations in the north of the country, in the state of Pará, in the Amazon region, in the last years of dictatorship. It's important to say that this research were coordinated by me, but it's a collective effort, and is carried out by a group of researchers who are part of the Peasant True Commission. That is an organization created by rural social movements to investigate human rights violations that affected rural populations during the dictatorship. So the research deals with the Amazon region. And in order to understand this region during the dictatorship, we need to consider two central things, two central elements. First of this is that there was a project of conservative modernization for the region, with envisaged developing the Amazon-based major projects aimed, for example, to modernizing agriculture, logging, mining, and also major works to integrate that territory, such as big roads, hydroelectric dams, for example. This here is a picture that shows the Transamazônica. Is one of the big roads built during the dictatorship. And you can say, if you read the headline, you can understand what kind of thoughts make these projects. For example, to unite Brazilians, we tear up the green hell. So the forest, the Amazon forest, is called green hell. And here, the northern Amazon, here we conquer the forest. Like in Portuguese, it's like we win the forest. So this was the idea, that the Amazon region was a place without development, without progress, and that should be like great projects from the dictatorship. And these projects, it's important to say, had several impacts on traditional people, especially indigenous communities and peasants. The state and corporate violence have affected these people's ways of life, in many cases leading to forced displacement and the loss of land. And at the same time, this has led to even greater land concentration in the region, with the expulsion of thousands of peasants' families. And during my research here, I found a very interesting document when I was researching at the Thomas Library. I found a document who was microfilmed in this collection. There is a collection called Brazil Popular Groups. And I found a newspaper that was produced by Pastoral Land Commission. Is a commission that was created inside the Catholic Church in Brazil, and is a commission that until today, in the present, tries to talk about the big problems that we have in the land in Brazil, for example, agrarian reform, violence in the field. So this paper is from July 1983 and deals with violence against peasants and the concentration of land in the region. In this fragment, for example, the Commission presents a list of 10 largest landowners in the Amazon region, questioning this ownership, because it was very common in all the region, land grabbing. We call in Portuguese grilagem. This is like still land. Yeah, it's really common until the present. So these companies that we investigate, Josapar, started investing in the north of Brazil, like buying lands, a big amount of lands. And in 1980, they teamed up with Banco de NASA, is a bank, the NASA de Investimento, and began to develop a series of projects, both in logging. Logging is like wood exploitation, mining, and agriculture. And how this was the area, but the area that the company was home, that the company wanted, was home to thousands of families of small farmers and traditional miners. This area had been accused of grilagem, like land grabbing, and a lawsuit because the companies couldn't prove the land titles. So the group companies, Josapar and the bank, they tried to evict the residents, but met a strong resistance, which led to an intense conflict that peaked between 1983 and 1985. So this was the area. This was the titles that the company has, but they claimed to be owner of almost 400,000. So it's a very land grabbing example that the company made there. This conflict took place in the state of Pará, and in Pará we had the most important rural guerrilla in Brazil, Guerrilha do Araguaia. So everything that happened in that state, for example, if the peasants claim that they have the right to be in the land, was seen by the eyes of the dictatorship as a subversion, yes, like a terrorist practice. So to understand the context of all this conflict, land grabbing and attempts to expel rural workers by the company, and on the other hand, a very strong resistance from a significant portion of these workers. With this resistance, Josapar created a security guard in 1981, commanded by James Vita Lopes, composed of military-trained security agents, increasing violence in the region. We call this a militia. In English, we call militia as well. And so it is very common until the present in Brazil, but it was a very strong militia that increased a lot the violence against the peasant family. So the peasants organized an armed resistance led by Quintino Lira da Silva, and but this resistance suffered a very big offensive by the military police of the state of Pará, with support from the DOPS. DOPS we call the political police of the dictatorships, against the resistance movement, resulting in deaths, illegal arrests, and torture. And in the late 1984, the Pará military police launched the third and final offensive against the peasants' resistance movement, and the action has very strong support from the companies. So we tried to investigate during this process of struggles if the company was responsible for human rights violations. And what we found, what was possible to find in the investigation. The first thing that the investigation revealed are direct links between the companies, the directors and shareholders, and members of the armed forces. And for example, and top echelons of the dictatorial government. The company had direct channels with agents from the dictatorship's security and intelligence agencies. And we found a lot of elements about tax favors and incentives through loans and financing from public banks. So the big point is that these companies, they received a lot of public investments and loans. So it was worthy for them to support the dictatorship. I will give you one other example that is here. One of the companies that Josapar had there obtained 30 permits for mineral exploitation. And at that time, the Minister of the Interior was a man called Mário Andreasa. His son is on the list of the shareholders of the company. And this is a clear evidence of corruption. And why it's so important? Because one of the myths about the dictatorship in Brazil is that there were no corruption during the dictatorship. And this is bullshit, yeah, because we have a lot sorry, I don't have other words because we have a lot of evidence that there was corruption everywhere during the dictatorship. And what else we found? We found the investigation identified the company participation either through direct action or through coordination, complicity with state agents in the following actions: murders and disappearances, forced displacement, misappropriation of land, destruction of crops and improvements, torture and beatings, death threats, illegal arrest, kidnapping, sexual violence, and forced abortion. We went to the area about 5 times. We made field research. We made oral history interviews, listening about 70 people who live in the area. And we also worked in some documents from the dictatorship's agency. For example, SNE is like a Information National Service that was created during dictatorship to monitorize society and groups and the opposition. So here I have an image that is published in a Brazilian newspaper. And here you can say the police, the military police, in one of the company's place. So the company gave the company gave arms, food, support for all the police actions to for the repression of the peasants' movement. Well, so we made the research during 2 years, and after that, we sent a report to the Federal Public Ministry. Yeah, because not only our research, the 13 research about 13 companies were sent to the Federal Public Ministry. What happened now? About Josapar, an inquiry was opened to investigate Josapar, which is still ongoing, so it didn't finish yet. And there are a number of developments in the regions. For example, the families and the communities affected, they created victims associations, and they are seeking redress, either from the Amnesty Commission or through the courts. Because, for example, the big aim of this kind of research is that people who are affected by the companies and by the dictatorship regime, they can have a kind of reparation. Yeah, so this is the main goal of all the investigations. And Well, the justice system is really slow in Brazil, especially when it deals with this kind of crime committed during the dictatorship. But we still have some hopes, yeah. And inquiry to the action is ongoing. So we keep talking to the public ministry, we keep giving them information and things like that. And one thing really important is that we took to the region 2 prosecutors, yes, from Rio Grande do Sul, who is the state of Josapá, and from Pará state. And it was the first time these people, the victims, were listened by a state representative. Yeah, representative. So it was really important because it was the first time the state was there to listen to them. And well, and finally, I would like to leave a few questions. I'm not waiting you make questions. I will it's like a kind of, I will make some questions for you. So just for us to think about together, yeah? The research, they show that state action was directly linked to business interests, but we still need to better delineate these connections, their nuances and directions, as well as identify more precisely the degrees and forms of corporate complicity and/or responsibility for human rights violations. During the research, points to new markers in the analysis of repression during the dictatorship. So the question is, how can this research contribute to thinking about the dimension of dictatorial repression and to broadening social perception of who its victims were? Because in Brazil, it's really common, people say, oh, the repression were only against, for example, the unions, the terrorist organization, the armed struggle. But nowadays, the research shows that we have a very big kind of victims, and we have to look more for them. And the other question is, how can we advance policies of memory, accountability, and reparations for these affected people and the communities? So that's it. Thanks a lot. I don't know if you, because I talked really, how to say it, quickly, because I was nervous. But thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. This is fascinating. I have many questions, but I think I will open up.
Sure.
First, and then, do you want me to get, or you can get the questions?
Yeah, sure.
I do have 2 questions following up on some things. How much of what you shared with us here today was known at the time it was happening? I'm sure the media was repressed, but I wonder if there was an underground press that was reporting and writing about any of this, or did the people not know some of this was happening until after it was all over? And going back to Volkswagen, people were found guilty of crimes from Volkswagen, you said earlier. I wonder if the investigation reached to Germany and if there was any evidence that the corporate owners in Germany knew what was going on in Brazil.
Very good. The first question I didn't get. The second, yes.
Então, eu quero saber o que se sabia na época da ditadura sobre os crimes esses específicos da Josapá. Se tinha matéria no jornal, se tinha alguma repercussão na época. Great.
And the second is about Volkswagen in Germany.
Se isso chegou na Alemanha. Eu não sei se a Volkswagen ainda é alemã.
Should I wait more questions or I can?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for the questions. Well, during the dictatorship, we have a lot of denounces, yeah, but not from the big media, big newspapers. No, the big newspapers, well, we have censorship, but also big newspapers, big communication companies were together with the dictatorship government, yeah. But a lot of movements. For example, I showed that newspaper from the pastoral, from that organization inside the Catholic Church. They were denouncing what was happening in Pará. For example, we found during the investigation many documents produced by this church institution about what was happening there. But they didn't have so many evidences, yeah, because for example, now we have access of a lot of documents produced by dictatorship, yeah, because we have, since Governo Lula in 2009, sorry, they found a very big project in Brazil. It's called Memórias Reveladas, it's like review memories. And there are thousands of documents produced by the dictatorship agencies. And so we found a lot of information in these files, yeah. In that time, during the dictatorship, they didn't have access. So they knew more about, because the priests who were there, things like that. I don't know if I answered.
Yes.
Yeah. And about the Volkswagen. This is very interesting, the Volkswagen, because nowadays in Brazil, there is another lawsuit against Volkswagen, but is about one farm that Volkswagen had in the north of Brazil, in Pará, and they are being accused of using slave work. So now there is another process going on against Volkswagen. When this process starts, this one that Volkswagen had to pay to the workers, first Volkswagen denied its responsibility, but the action was held by the unions, and they made a lot of public campaigns, yeah. So it starts to damage the Volks image, even in Germany. It's interesting because, for example, a lot of advertisement or reports in newspapers, it starts to provoke Volkswagen to answer. So first the company hired an historian to go in there and finding some things, but they, in the end of the process, they start to not collaborate. Collaborate is a strong word, okay? Because they use very bad tactics, strategies. For example, they try to separate the workers to buy people, you know, for example, oh, you give up the action with the union and I give you and your family money. So they tried a lot of dirty strategies, but after they had to pay, okay? They had to pay, but it's a small amount, okay? They should have paid much more, because what they did, and we have several evidences. But yeah, in this campaign, the company in German suffered some pressure as well, and it led Volkswagen to make the agreement with the public ministry. But now, in this new action, they are not collaborating at all. They are denying everything. But we have a lot of proofs that they use slave work there.
This is a great presentation. I also have two questions. The first is, how did the 13 companies, how were they selected? Is it because there were already suspicions that they had been involved? And then the second question, I guess, is what was the, incentive structure for companies? Is it that they would benefit from this complicity, or was it more defensive of, if they weren't complicit, that the state would then, I don't know, punish them?
Great question. Well, the first one, how were the companies selected, yeah? Especially because we have from the 80s, 90s, a lot of denounces, yeah, from the human rights organization, and especially from the unions, because a lot of workers were persecuted during those times. So they choose the company, especially because there were denounces before, yeah. But we have a big list of companies, big companies, that now are being investigated. But the project had a small budget, so they have to choose these 13 companies. Yeah.
Were they chosen randomly, or were these the ones that had the most announcements?
I think it is really interesting because the choice was not made by the university. The public ministry and the university, they listened to the unions, to academic researchers. So there were a lot of things that made this choice happen, yeah. But especially is the cases that we have more evidences. Josapar was a choice of the Peasant True Commission. We we asked for the university to include this company from the rural areas. So it depends how, yeah. And the other, why, if they would benefit. They would benefit, of course, and they got benefits from many, like taxes, loans, financing, but also because they didn't want the workers' organization. Yeah, so they got a lot of money with the dictatorship policies against the labor rights, against, so most of the companies have the same project for Brazil. They share with the dictatorship this idea of development. And so I don't think it's to defense or because they were scared about the dictatorship. No, they have the same project and for them, and all the speech against communism and things like that.
Thank you.
We have a big problem in Brazil last years that was many people hope the return of the dictatorship. Then I think that we research many things is an important way to change the consensus. Then I think about this, how will think that your research can improve this social justice about this process, and how can change this conscience maybe, or how do you think that can share this research? Yeah,
right. It's really important because we are really concerned about how to publish the research, yeah. And there are a lot of information that we cannot share because the big report we send to the public ministry, but there are some information that are like secret, confidential, because you have to preserve the people, yeah. But we published a book, the University of São Paulo published a book with what they call public report. So it's the part of the research that we can publish. And we try to make a lot of other, for example, we had an agree with the Agência Pública, that is a kind of newspaper in Brazil, like more alternative. And they published a lot of materials,
Articles.
articles about the companies. So it's interesting because it had some, it spread a little bit in Brazil. But your question, I mean, is really important because I think one of our biggest problem is that people don't know about dictatorship, don't understand what the dictatorship meant to Brazil and to the people. So I don't have a receipt, but I think we should like talk more. We should qualify the history teaching about this period. And there are some really nice projects that are going on now in Brazil, but it's not something really easy to make.
I have a quick question and then, but just about that, how is the company? Is the company cooperating? I mean, what is the relationship between the team, the research team and the company? And I have to say, this is the best price of Brazil. I'm like, how can I?
I don't live anymore. I cannot.
No, I'm not anymore. It's like the best price.
Right. Yeah.
So, but seriously, it is interesting because, I mean, first, I'm curious about the outcome of the Truth Commission, because differently than other countries, the Truth Commission in Brazil doesn't have a necessary legal effect.
Exactly.
Others have, but in Brazil it doesn't. But then it did, in the sense that you have to have a prosecutor that reads this and says, there's something here, and then it starts another case.
Yeah.
And in fact, if I understood correctly, the Volkswagen case is actually sponsoring the research for the other cases. So it's like a snowball.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about that because the Truth Commission, I mean, one of the ways in which Dilma defended the Truth Commission is that she says, it's harmless because there's nothing we can do. But if we're doing, there's actually, it's an interesting outcome. But I'm also interested about how the companies are reacting. And if there is any sort of like engagement, threats, attacks to public universities, that kind of thing.
Great.
Yeah, I would just like to add, because it's the thing about research, like going after the companies is very recent in our history. Like there's a turn point in when you're studying dictatorship in Brazil, that like many years ago, people used to say that it was a civil thing. Like the civil, they have a compliance with the dictatorship. And just like, I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we started seeing that was not possible. So the companies, they provoke the coup and everything else. So for you think that's important for us to go after that? Because I think that our biggest failure in Brazil is to recognize that we give them pardon to the military system. So right now, all this process that you were being part of as well, to just like recognize it, and then people can just like get a trial and think about get a reparation thing is very recent as well. At the same time, the Brazilian government, they gave it reparation, but only for the military family. So that's another issue. So yeah, I would just like to ask you, what do you think about that? Because I think that for a long time in history in Brazil, we didn't think about the companies and their responsibility. And for me, it totally changed the game when you're doing research, because we can go through that. And like we have the Opening the Archive, that project between Brown University and Universidade Federal de Maringá. It's unbelievable what they're doing. And I don't know if you use them as well, but I would just like to thank you. It was amazing. It's always important for us to map this relationship because Brazil is so huge. And at the same time, I could never imagine that South Brazil and North Brazil were connected in that
that way, so, yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, just Kayla's question. It is really important to us to talk about the Truth Commission because there was a work group in the group commission that was responsible to investigate repression against union and workers. And this work group was really important to start all the actions that because it's interesting in Brazil, there was not the academic studies that started all this thing we are living now. It was the social movements, the unions and everything. And the True Commission was really important to make it happen. Yeah, so this group was led by a very important lawyer, Rosa Cardoso, was the coordinator. He was a Dilma lawyer during the dictatorship. And so they made a great work. And much what we have now is because of their work in True Commission. But yes, after this first lawsuit, the money Volkswagen gave to the public ministry sponsored our researches. And we hope if we can get another deal with those 13 companies, we hope we can sponsor new research. So yeah, it's kind of a snowball. Yeah. And about Josapar, it's really important to say that, for example, the public ministry in Brazil, every research team had one prosecutor who was responsible for accompany the research, okay? And it was really different one from another. Our prosecutor was really committed and present, but some prosecutors didn't play this role very well, yeah? And as in the same way, with the companies is the same. Some companies deny everything. For example, Itaipu. Itaipu is a very big hydroelectric in Brazil, it's a stattal company. And you think, oh, if it's stattal, it's from the state, they will give us everything. No, they didn't give, they didn't collaborate with the research at all. Even Petrobras was hard, yeah. With Josapar, while researchers, we didn't have any kind of relationship, yeah. But as the public ministry opened the inquiry, the company was already notified, yeah, and they are already answering some questions that the public ministry is doing. So the company already know that there is an action, they are already aware of everything, but as I said before, it's really slow. The justice system is really slow about this kind of case. And yeah, your question, it's really important about how we give the name, because during many times in Brazil, we only talk about military dictatorship. After that, we start to speak about a civil military dictatorship. But civil can be everything. I am civil, and I don't know, the owner of Fiat is a civil too, yeah. And then, but civil doesn't say much, yeah. So nowadays, a lot of researchers.
It also blame the population for
Exactly, like everybody.
Like they can have the power to do that.
Yeah, everybody is responsible. Of course, it is important to say the coup in Brazil and in many other countries, it had a lot of popular support. Yeah, we have to discuss how this support was created. It's really important to understand it's not natural that a population support coup. But it's different if you say civil for a group of people, social movements, or companies. So nowadays, a lot of researchers are using corporate military dictatorship. We say empresarial militar. I'm using now this concept all the time when I talk about dictatorship, because I think we have to give the names. This discussion in Argentina, for example, is really strong. They already use this name. And about the reparation in Brazil, Brazil was really late to any kind of memory policy or everything. For example, in Argentina, we have the first true commission in 1983, CONADEP.
Right after.
In Brazil, in Chile, we have, like in the beginning of the 90s after Pinochet left. But in Brazil, we had only 2011, but it started 2012, when Dilma was the president. So everything took a long time. The first memory policies started during Lula government in the beginning of the 2000, But we have the Amnesty Commission gave indemnization,
compensation.
Gave compensation to former militants, former people who were persecuted by the government or their families. So we have this.
Not
since,
all of them.
Yeah, no, not all of them. And it's important to say that this commission, they also change according to the government. Yeah, for example, all the policies during Bolsonaro government were cut. Now they are starting again, but of course the state never compensate all the people in communities they should. This year we had a change in the commission, Amnesty Commission, and they are accepting now collective amnesty. Como é que eu falo? Anistia coletiva. Collective amnesty. For example, we had the first indigenous group that were initiated, that got the amnesty.
Yeah.
And we are trying for this community in Pará. We already helped the association to ask for a collective amnesty as well. It's waiting there, but it will take a lot as well. But we have hope they get it doesn't give them any money, okay?
Yeah.
But it's like a public recognition that they were persecuted by the state.
Because they're also not considered civils. They didn't have indigenous people, they didn't have like right to vote or anything.
No,
Back
but
then.
they are civil, they can be considered any group, collective group. It's okay.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that because back then they didn't have rights.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
they're like the state was controlling them. They're not considered like
Citizens with all the rights. Exactly.
Yes.
Anything else?
So, any other questions? If not, I think we could end by saying that wonderful movie about the Brazilian dictatorship will start at the Harris Theater on Friday, this coming Friday. And we'll be there for about 10 days, maybe. So, in that.
I'm still here.
No, I'm still here.
It's
the name of the
watch
movie.
it.
Yeah, it's very
Three Academy
Oscar nominations.
Nominations, yes. And so you can, we started this with Alessandra, then you can watch the movie and come back on Friday the 14th.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
We got a whole
plan
plan.
for the whole.
Hashtag movie,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.